routine is the enemy of architecture, routine is the enemy of art, because it only produces the predictable. And I think the pavilion is a fantastic opportunity, and it's a fantastic occasion to resist routine, to go beyond routine.
And we believe it's much more interesting for the work to be presented as a built space rather than an exhibition of drawings, photographs and models.
I think one thing which is we feel exciting to try is creating even more light, even more transparent architecture.
One of the goals at the outset was not to make a building, to make something, you know, like a little intervention, if you will.
It's a laboratory for architecture, but it's also a laboratory for new ideas, and I think that that's important, that what is a laboratory each year for a new form of architecture is also a laboratory for new contents.
It is something of a sort of heroic endeavour, I would say, on everybody's part, and every year we learn a huge amount.
I think they called us on February 8th. I think we said yes. 3-4 days later, something designed 3 weeks after that.
We usually get involved in around February or this year in early March. And considering that the building needs to be finished always at the end of June or early July, that gives really no more than a 5-month design and construction program. So yeah, in terms of normal building projects, it's a pretty tight timescale.
One of the first things Nishizawa told me at the beginning of the project is that don't treat this like a sheet of metal with lots of colors. They are designing from like a chunk of aluminum. They're just chipping that chunk of aluminum to the absolute minimum.
The building is, you know, on the face of it, a very simple building. I mean, the kind of simplicity and openness and seamlessness is really, you know, a big part of what the team was trying to achieve.
The minimalism makes it quite challenging, but on the other hand, it also makes it quite clear what you've got to do. So for this year's Serpentine, that was about using very, very few elements to provide a little protected space where people could sit for a lecture or sit for dinner and not feel uncomfortable.
If you know, describing each one of these little bits as leaves, there was always needed to be a big leaf. So there were obviously many, many different shapes, but they always had like one big section where you could have the auditorium, and they always had, at a minimum, one medium part where you could have the cafe. Midway through, we always had the table part because we thought that was cool, and we wanted that. And so those kind of three worlds were established, and then we wanted to get kind of the biggest extent that we could, that the gallery and Royal Parks would allow.
So I think it was quite easy for us to understand on a macro level really what they were intending to try and achieve, but what we didn't understand, I don't think what they understood at the start, but we learnt together through the process, is actually what that means in terms of every single detail, right down to the way that the panels are joined together, the way the column meets the roof, the way the lights are recessed into the floor, the way that the conduit is invisible, the way the roof drains. Everything is kind of affected by that minimal kind of simplicity.
It's interesting that the pressure on you know, me and the guys around me was actually to do less. You know, we couldn't throw a system at it. We actually had to figure out how the pieces of the sculpture did the job for us.
In the end, we're incredibly interested in quite minimal things and not seeing screws. And you know, together with Arup, we came to quite a good detail, I think. You know, how the panels tongue together and slot together and screw together is a very sensible, almost natural way of progressing.
You can see on the panel, you can see the plywood tongues where the core protrudes out, and the tongues from the adjacent panels lock together. It becomes quite a sort of three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle to get the arrangement of tongues such that you can slide the panel in at 45 degrees and make it lock with two neighbours that are already in place.
Many architects talk about sort of connectivity between outside and inside, but quite often it's quite clear where the edge is. And if you really go to this year's Serpentine, it's very difficult to really sense where the edge of the building is.
Part of it is the desire to have it sort of disappear a little bit, so that when it's all mirrored, you see reflections of the park, and you kind of don't know where the thing ends and begins.
And sometimes people feel continuity, sometimes some a little bit definitive area, or also the people feel, also can see the moving of the car or the moving of the people. It's all mixed in this.
Architecture with no walls will allow everybody to come out from all around, which can give the definition of freedom, like park. This is one thing that we wanted to achieve.
The architecture makes me feel very conscious of my scale within the structure. At various points you can either feel that there is a sort of soaring canopy above you, or that you really feel very, very aware of your own presence. And that is a very, very, very interesting thing.
It's the absolute opposite of hey, look at me. I mean, it's not going to stop traffic driving past in the same way that some of the previous pavilions have done, that sort of poke out, above the trees and so on. So I think, I think that kind of quiet, sort of, sleek elegance is really what differentiates this year's pavilion from any other.
I think it speaks for itself. I mean, it's a simple thing. It's not. There's no secrets about it. It's just like a floating funny mirror in the park, reflecting, bringing the park in, mixing pavilion and park. It's pretty simple.